Hi, and welcome to Big News from WallopPop.com, part of the AOL network of broadcasts. I am Jason Cochran, and we have a really interesting, exciting guest here today. She's Elyse Luray. She is a history detective. Now, if you know this show on PBS, you'll be excited too. And if you don't know it, just wait till you hear what she does for a living. It is super interesting. Elise, what is a history detective? What do you do?
Well, first of all, anybody can be a history detective. So I always say that first and foremost because I think it's important. And basically what we do on the show is we take an object that someone has a question about and we show the journey that one needs to take to answer the question as to what the object is and most importantly, how it relates to American history.
Now, it's a little different from Antiques Roadshow, which you've also appeared on as an appraiser, right?
It is different. I mean, they're both important. Antiques Roadshow tells you the monetary value of the piece, which we all obviously really want to know. And History Detectives kind of takes it one step further and says, well, this is why it's important. This is how it relates to American history, which the monetary value always is important to know about. But we really tell you how you figure out, what the object is and the historical importance about it. And I think the most important thing that we do is we take an object and we connect it. We show you, even if you don't have a personal connection to it, we're going to connect you to it in a bigger, broader sense.
Yeah, one of the reasons I am passionate about this show, I really never miss it. It's on mostly in the summer times, and sometimes you can catch reruns during the year. I don't miss it because it makes human history.
Yes.
History was just things that didn't happen to you; they happened to somebody else. Not about generals marching and laws being made. Human beings leave behind objects that they cried over and fought over, and you sort of bring those things to life by finding out.
We do. We try.
What the stuff in the attic, what story it has to tell.
Yeah, and Wes Callan, who's one of the other history detectives on the show, often says a lot, well, there's the big H, the history that you learn in school, and then there's the small H, which is the history that you connect to, and we try to bring the two together.
Yeah, it'll be tough to go through the garage at your grandma's house and see these little knickknacks quite in the same way once you've seen your show, because everything is made by someone, made in a certain time, made in a certain way, was owned by someone. There's all sorts of stories that you can uncover from this most seemingly useless of objects. One of the things you did in this past season, which was the 7th season,
very good,
was a piece of scrap metal that family lore said was a piece of Amelia Earhart's plane. And you think, well, wait, now how is that possible? She vanished. What did you discover about that piece?
Well, first of all, let me start off by saying one of the things that we have the hardest time with is family folklore, because I would say 60% of the items submitted to us, as well as the Antiques Roadshow, people say, well, I was told, family legend says, and that's all you have to go on. So that's it's always tough because, and people are passionate about what their families have told them before, but now we have to say, okay, well, we need proof. So the first thing that we did with Amelia Earhart, and I had the exact same response that you did, but the gentleman that owned it, grandfather, was stationed in Hawaii at Luke Field, and he was sick, and he was a mechanic. And it turns out that Amelia Earhart crashed before she went to take off. So we were able to establish when the crash was, where it was, and at the same time we pulled the military records to prove that the grandfather, who claims that he actually grabbed this piece from that crash, he was there. So there were two parts of the investigation, getting his military records, getting the family to sign the releases to allow us to get them from the government, looking at the military records, making sure he was there the day of the crash, and then actually having the piece of metal tested to see if it was period or not and if it could have been on her plane. And another really fascinating part of that story is her Lockheed, there wasn't really that many planes to compare it to. There's only one out there that is a perfect match to the plane that she flew around the world, and we were lucky enough to find it.
And basically you go all around the country to piece together the puzzle.
We do. I'm still waiting to go to Hawaii, though. That's the only state I haven't been to.
Yeah, so basically she had a fender bender. This guy helped repair the plane and took a piece of it. And when they repaired her plane, she took off again months later and then was never seen from again. So it was a piece of the plane, but the one piece that sort of didn't fly with her on the final journey.
Well, what happened was she ground looped.
Yeah.
He was a mechanic, but he was sick, so he didn't work on it. They actually had to send the repairs out of Hawaii to get fixed. She had to wait 8 weeks until she could actually take off, costing her time and actually changing her route.
Which might have contributed to the fact that...
Yeah, but if you watch the show really carefully, basically the reason why we think she crashed was because her coordinates were off on the last part of her journey.
Right.
So
and she didn't have enough of gas to reconnect with the
her
proper
coordinate.
She had more. She could have looped around and found it, but it was too late.
It was too late, and she was landing on a tiny little spot. So, but yes, I mean, she did ground loop. Most people don't know that, and Since it has aired, there has been another historical society that said they may have another piece of her plane as well. But the great thing about this piece right now, there's all this speculation of where she crashed, and people think they might have found her parts and stuff, yada, yada, yada. But we now have the control. Anybody that comes up and says, I was in the Pacific, I dove down, I found this crash, I think it's Amelia Earhart. So we now actually have the control piece to say, well, it has to match this.
It's a contribution to the historical record that wasn't there before the TV show. It's interesting, TV, a lot of these shows are now contributing to the record. There's another show called Time Team, which goes in and basically no one else has the money to do these digs. Or to do the research that you're doing, but because a TV show has made it possible, we're able to enrich the record.
Yes, thanks to OPB, which supports both of our shows. And I also, I think one of the really important things about our show is that we really show how important public institutions are. We show how important the past is. You have to learn from the past to go forward. We show how historical societies are really important. And what we're trying to do, especially in the classrooms, is Google is not research. Bing is not research. And our younger generation, when they want to research, they Google it. That's how they, and so we're trying to show them you can only really get so far. You have to really get in touch with your primary resources.
Yeah, Wikipedia is not a primary source.
No, it's not. Since you can change
a primary school source, maybe. What's happening right now? And that's good that you mentioned the Google. Don't Google as your first step necessarily.
No, I don't mean that. You can. I actually think your first
only
step should be
Google,
right.
Yeah, but then go find the archive, find the library that has the primary source.
100%. And the other thing is that I think the internet does a lot to help you when you get to that library. I mean, I interviewed people at the New York Public Library System, and they had a huge initiative when we first started to put as much on the internet as they can so that it cut down the research time when they came into the library. They knew what they were looking for. This is what I need. This is what I need to see. So the internet absolutely can help you.
You can't fly around all the country if you're doing it for your own stuff in your own yard.
Right. It just only gets you so far.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't exclude it. I just wouldn't rely on it.
How do you guys do it? You have a team of people.
We do. We have a wonderful, wonderful research team. We have thousands and thousands of submissions. We also, and I have to say, the reason why we survive and we've been able to do this is because of the librarians and the archivists and the historians all around the country.
I'll bet they're so excited when they see you coming.
Well, but they're also, they're so knowledgeable and they're so happy to share their knowledge, which I think is really important for everybody. And if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be able to do it because we can't fly to go look up one little piece of information that could be really important to the research of the whole, the whole investigation.
And you can't do it either. You need the team to do advance work. Otherwise, you could pursue dead ends for the whole year. And
we do, exactly.
And
not only that, but we also have fact checkers.
Yeah.
Because if it goes on air on PBS and it's not right, well, I'll hear it from hundreds and hundreds of people. I mean, I actually said that Appomattox was in the northern part of Virginia, and I must have gotten thousands of emails saying, well, we don't actually consider it the northern part of Virginia.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So your team will lay the groundwork, and then once they sort of know where the leads are going to be, or once they've got the research in, you go in and then film how you put this together. By the way, these properties fall apart.
A lot. And some we work on. I mean, Amelia Earhart, we probably worked on for 6 to 8 months because of how long it was taking us to get the testing results back and things like that. And some just kind of fall into place.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what the object is and what's out there. But the very first thing is we look at the object. Can it tell a story about American history? It's great if it was your grandmother's and it's a beautiful piece of American silver, but if it doesn't connect to something that gives us a bigger picture, we can't do anything about it.
Who owned the silver? Who made the silver?
Something that
you can hold on to.
And then, is it real? Because if the object isn't real from the beginning, what's the point? It's fake. Then you kind of. So Wes and I kind of vet that more. If it's a Native American story, maybe our new history detective who's coming on to work with us, Eduardo, might do it. Gwen really helps out a tremendous amount with the architecture, and Kufu really does a lot of the African American. So we just all kind of vet it and start with that. We always get a lot of calls. What's your opinion on this? Do you think we should go into this? Is there a story here? Then we start researching it. Then we go out into the field. And always when we start filming, we have new discoveries.
Now, when a person wants to do this on their own, first step, Google, fine. But how do you find which archive might have something that pertains to what you need to know? How do you locate archives that have what you need?
Well, you first have to start doing your research. I mean, it's pretty obvious. You always have to go to the point of origin, the town, the area where the piece is taking place, those little historical societies. The internet really gives you a good indication of that. Or if you go to your local library and you look at footnotes from a book that you're doing research on that's very particular to your subject matter, the footnotes might have come from an archive. So that's a really good
Right.
way to, I mean, I'm always looking at the footnotes. Where did they get this information? Because maybe what they saw something, I might be able to find something that they didn't say. So I'm always looking at footnotes in books. And I always make a list when I start. I learned this, I learned that, I need to know this, I need to know that. I talk to as many people as I could possibly talk to. As I said earlier, people love knowledge, and they love to share their knowledge. So, I make a checklist. Did we do this? Did we learn this? Did we that? And then when I get to the archive, you can't overlook anything. I mean, anything. You could pick up a photograph and go, oh, that's a nice photograph of the street. But then all of a sudden you're noticing on the street that there's this little sign that might lead a clue to whatever your investigation is. So don't overlook anything. Land deeds, newspapers have tremendous amount of information that can help you during, that time period of what was going on that might help you. I did a story this year about this woman had this wax figure that kind of looked like contemporary art, and she thought that it might have been beeswax that was going up in the shores in the 15 and 1600s in Portland, Oregon. And I was able to find that there were actually shipwrecks of galleons that were coming in from the Philippines and other places, coming into port to sailing past and wrecking in Portland from a newspaper. So it took a long time, but we were able to find it.
Yeah, and you have to go through these old microfilms and look at
We do.
story after
I hate
story.
microfiche.
You must spend a lot of time. I mean, obviously, it's the stupidest question ever, but I mean, it's a sort of a lonely profession to be a researcher. As well.
Yeah, but it's not lonely because everyone that's doing it is passionate.
Yeah.
So you're I feel like you're always surrounded by peers. And the funny thing is anything you're researching, there's a group that are experts or collectors or knowledgeable about it. I mean, you can pick any topic in the world and there's people that are passionate about it. So it's kind of fun.
And it's especially exciting when you're uncovering something that people either ignored, overlooked, got wrong. When you're correcting the record, I bet the passion is even more.
Oh, totally. I mean, my last story for History Detectives this year was about a bridge
that was a good one, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it was Sherman's March to Columbia. Thank you. It's Sherman's March to Columbia, and they had the location of the bridge wrong
on the historical marker. That was,
yes, they did.
So don't necessarily trust those historical markers that are at the at the historical sites all over the country. They may be wrong.
Well, let's not.
Well, yours was,
but mine was wrong, and they are correcting it. And it was a great investigation. Yeah. And
the way you found that was super interesting. You actually got a hold of some geophysics equipment.
Yes.
And you went over a part of the shoreline where you thought the original bridge might have been, and there was so much magnetic activity there that they realized this had to have been where all those cannons and horses and wagons came through.
Very good.
It was so interesting. I'm telling you, this is a fascinating show. This is this anonymous looking part of next to a bridge in Columbia, South Carolina that people would just drive on by. And it had all this story.
But I have to give credit to David, who was a gentleman who was a contributor who asked the question. It was really his passion because he noticed that there were these hooks on the river, and he really, he had just bought a house, and he had spent a really good time pondering this for a long time, thinking, I don't think this is right. So if he hadn't brought it to our attention, we wouldn't have been able to do it.
Sure.
But
by the way,
really
what's happening on the ground right now in America? Historical societies, libraries losing money, aren't? I mean, a lot of them are cutting their hours down.
Unfortunately.
I mean, is it more of a struggle now to do this kind of research than it was even 5 years ago?
No, it's not in that aspect. No, I mean, I think they recognize the importance of history detectives because it helps bring to light how important historical societies and libraries are.
Well, they'll open the doors for you guys, but what about your average person who wants to do their own history detecting?
I really think that they would open the doors to anybody. I mean, sure, we get special treatment. We have the cameras in. We might get in. I mean, the New York Public Library lets us in on Mondays when, everybody else can't get in. It's actually the only day they let us in. But
you don't disturb people. That's fair.
But, we definitely get, the red carpet. But I think to be perfectly honest, maybe except for the Smithsonian, you can really get in anywhere. I mean, the Smithsonian's pretty tough, but they're even tough with us. And it's a public institution. It drives me crazy. But, they give us like an hour and we have to pay. And I'm like, but you're a public institution. And
where'd my tax dollars go?
Right.
Yeah. Well, are people trying to cash in on their objects now more and more than they were?
Everybody wants to cash in.
Of everyone's mind
of
when
course.
They come to you, they're hoping it's worth a lot of money.
Absolutely. I don't actually, on history detectives, I haven't really found anybody who was like, okay, I'm going to sell it.
Right.
They have one or two people have gone, Wes owns an auction house, Cowan's Auctions, so he would be the best outlet at the time for someone if they wanted to sell something. And he gets consignments here and there, but it really our show that people want to know the history of it. And some of the stuff doesn't really have monetary value. I mean, I did a story on incubator babies this year. When the incubator first came out, it was part of a sideshow. hospitals weren't using it. So a man put them in, sideshows and made them kind of like these freak things. And he was actually saving people's lives. His name was Clooney, and he was actually saving people's lives. But that's how the incubators got and preemies got recognized in world recognitions from the Chicago World's Fair in the 30s. But the piece was really a woman had a souvenir that was a World's Fair silver cup, and she wanted to know, was she a incubator baby? And that wasn't talked about at that time. When she was born, she was literally placed in a shoebox in her oven because she was premature and her parents didn't have money. And he came and said, I can save you, but you're gonna have to come to this World's Fair. And she's like, I was on View and my parents didn't talk about it.
She was a tourist attraction.
She was completely a tourist attraction. So her piece wasn't monetarily worth anything. It's a World's Fair, has a little bit of World's Fair memorabilia value to it, but not nothing.
It's interesting. Is private institutions maybe not having the money to introduce either a concept, the historical research as you do, or the incubator, even in the 30s. It took a private enterprise to sort of get it off the ground. And it was a little bit of showmanship. Started this stuff off.
Completely. Besides penicillin, it's one of the major, percentage-wise, it saves more people's lives than almost anything.
So don't write off the stuff you see on TV as this reality show stuff, because sometimes it's really true. And you guys make some actual human connections with the people, like the woman who
it was a perfect example.
And
and not only did we make a human connection with her being a preemie and this man saved your life and there's nothing to be ashamed of, we actually brought in another person who the same thing happened, who was a preemie as well.
They were very moved, if I remember.
They were hysterically crying.
Tell me, did you have one investigation that you just remember clearly as the people being extremely moved to have found out what their object meant?
Oh God, there's been so many.
Yeah. That would be a good one example.
That was a really good example. Gwen and I did a story a couple years back about a Cherokee Bible. A white family owned a Cherokee Bible that was in their family, and she wanted to know, what was the inscription and what was the story about. And the story was that her great grandfather, who was Cherokee, actually went on the Trail of Tears because he had married. He was Cherokee. He was white. The grandmother was Cherokee, and he chose to give up his life.
So he gave up his life, even though he wouldn't have had to have moved.
Right.
And he took the Trail of Tears,
which ended
a death march.
A death march.
Yeah.
They survived. They ended in Oklahoma, and he it was all for love, and that was a pretty good one as well.
What's the most surprising thing that someone has turned in to be investigated? Whether or not, I guess, it came to fruition.
Surprising. Well, we once had the first condom, or the first, I shouldn't say condom, I would say birth control. And when we actually got to the person's, and we were doing a story on how the Compton laws had actually not stopped us in the United States, had stopped birth control for a while with these syringes. And when we got to her house, all she had was the box. She didn't have anything that went inside. And we looked at it, we're like, well, where is the birth control? And she's like, it's not here. I'm like, well, we're doing a story in a box. So we made it work, but there wasn't any device. So that was pretty funny.
So you can make a story out of almost anything.
You can. I mean, I even did a story on it was an opium scale box that the opium scale would go into. So I didn't even have the opium scale. And it was a story on the Chinese during the gold rush in Montana during the time in Butte, Montana, and how their lives were.
Do people study history as much as they ought to? We know that they're eliminating all sorts of things out of the public school system. Are you finding you do a lot of speaking at universities right now?
I am. I actually am finding a tremendous amount of people coming up to me and saying, I love history. I just got an email yesterday from a woman named Skylar in Nebraska who just did a documentary on the Depression. She is in high school. She submitted it to the History Channel and was one of the finalists. I get emails from college students all the time saying I want to do something in history. So I'm really seeing a resurgence of it. And anybody that is an appraiser of anything has to study history because the appraising value comes from its historical value.
Knowing the provenance of something is the first step to knowing the value.
Totally. So, all these appraisers out there in the world, are also kind of history detectives. And, when you go to a antique show and people are going and searching, or even when you go to your regular tag sale, these are people that are looking at items from their past that obviously they don't realize that they might be these history buffs, but there is some connection to history that they're doing it.
Sure. Yeah, it really does. You won't go into a flea market with quite the same eye ever again after watching a few episodes of your show.
Well, or you're like me and say, oh, that's junk. That's a big problem I kind of have is, oh, that's not junk. That's junk. That's junk.
You come from an appraisal world, but how do you feel when things turn mercenary and people start thinking about the monetary value of things even after you've done all this
I
personal
absolutely
research?
have no problem with it. I totally, as an appraiser and as working for Christie's for 12 years, realize that art is a commodity. Now, however, I will probably tell you that Gwen and Takufu, and rightly so, from them as historians,
They're from the academic world.
they want nothing to do with monetary value. And
Yeah.
I respect that. They think everything should be in a public institution and it does not have monetary value. It's the historical importance. I recognize the fact that we all need to make a buck.
Sure.
So-
But I don't know what the market is like right now, even to sell these items.
Well, we're in a recession, obviously. Middle market is getting killed. But if you have something that's really good, I mean, I just did a sale. I'm an auctioneer. I just did the Kaufman sale over the weekend. The Kaufmans used to own K&B Toys, and they have one of the largest collections in the world of antique toys, primarily focusing in automobilia, but an incredible collection. The first part we sold in March, which was a really bad time to sell, and it did $4 million. Over the weekend, we did very close to $3 million in 1,200 toys. There was a Marklin fire pumper that sold for $150,000. There was a German Mickey and Minnie toy that sold for $85,000. So good stuff really sells. I mean, a small auction house in Massachusetts last month sold a sampler, which I don't know if you know what a sampler
There's
is.
little stitching.
Yes, close to $500,000. So like rare, really good stuff. Even in this market, it sells really, really well. It's the middle market and the contemporary art that's really probably getting hit the most.
Does knowing who might have stitched the sampler make it more valuable?
I don't know
Or
if
is
they
that
could really
just-
tell.
Just
at
make
that
it more
point.
treasurable.
I get a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Condition is really, really important. Rarity is important. Subject matter. Where is it from?
The story just excites the
I
historian.
guess so. I mean, I happen to personally like samplers from a decorative point of view, but it was a really good early example.
Someone asked me if I would ask you if there's a rivalry between your show and the Antiques Roadshow people. You guys have softball games, see who wins.
Marsha kind of doesn't let us. I mean, she's been very supportive to Wes and I about being on the show. But the Roadshow, you kind of really can't appear anywhere else. You don't see any of the Antiques Roadshow people anywhere else except for the Antiques Roadshow. So it's kind of hard for me to answer that because I don't do the Roadshow anymore since.
It's not so much a rivalry. You just stay in different corners.
No. Well, Wes is on both shows,
Right,
and I
okay.
used to be on one of the shows, and it's a fabulous, fabulous show. I mean, I love
a
it.
fascinating
I mean, I
show.
watch it every Monday night. So,
Sure.
we all help each other. I mean, look, if you think about it, when you pull up to a gas station, there's 3 other gas stations right there. When you pull up, for fast food, there's 3 other fast foods there. Contemporary art at New York is sold at Christie's and Sotheby's the same time of year. Competition is good.
There's more of these TV shows on too, where people are researching the history of items. This Pawn Stars show that's on History Channel.
Oh yeah,
for
I
example.
saw that the other day.
Yeah,
I like it.
yeah, I do too.
I actually really like it.
yeah.
I don't necessarily agree with all the prices, but I like it.
No, but then they're just thinking purely again in mercenary terms. What is it going to mean in terms of cashing in at the pawn store?
Totally. I actually funny from that show, have been getting a lot of emails from people that own shops and asking me their opinion on things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a tough call because
What-
you have to see the pieces.
I mean, with all these TV shows appearing, like that one, these guys are just pawn guys who run a shop in Vegas. Is there a temptation or is there a calling to move to another network, more viewers, or have people come to you to try to do another show of your
Well,
own?
I mean, I do some shows on HGTV.
What do you
I do something called it's actually, we're not shooting anymore, but it's called If Walls Could Talk,
Mhm.
and people find things in their home and they I praise it at the end. They're renovating and they find things physically in their home that they bought. And I am also the expert at something that I've done for 5 years now called the Longest Yard Sale or the Endless Yard Sale.
Sure.
People call it 2 different things. It's actually airing next October 11th on HGTV. And this year we kind of had fun with it. We had a competition. People went shopping at the yard sale. I gave them different tasks and we kind of, whoever won got $1,000. But I really stayed with PBS. I came from Christie's, which is a very high-end auction house. And in my opinion, there's very few television networks that kind of have that same high-end,
Yeah.
sophisticated.
They're not going to cut corners. They're going to get it right. Aren't they?
Yeah, and so I've really, I've had offers. I've just really kept it tight to keep
Yeah.
that high
Oh, yeah.
end strong.
Oh, fantastic! And I just wish their DVDs were cheaper because I would buy every history detectives there is.
But you
can
can
see
get
a lot
them
of them
on
online.
There's now a podcast.
It's just now, I
Yeah.
think, in the last year or so. You
Yes.
can watch a lot of these investigations
Yes.
yourself online.
You can
which
go
is
to PBS.
fantastic. I really recommend you do that, and don't just assume that from the headline. Although that doesn't sound very interesting, I guarantee you'll find something human and interesting. And I've swear I've actually cried, I admit it, at this show several times. It's because when you realize what these objects meant to the people who originally had them or to the people who inherit them.
Yeah. Like the War Diary. That was definitely the best one ever.
Yeah, this was a guy who, can you explain it?
Yeah, sure. Wes did the story. It was a gentleman who had a diary, and he died, and a friend of
in the war. Yeah.
And another gentleman brought the diary, brought it back home. Somebody else had it, came to us and said, I want to find if there's any living relatives. And we were able to trace his daughter, the person's daughter who was still living. And the woman never met her father because he died before she was born. He did know that his wife was pregnant. And there was a whole story about how much he loved his wife and how he couldn't wait to meet his newborn child that he never met. So
and the newborn child now, a middle-aged woman.
Yes, and now she owns the diary.
Oh.
And I cry every time I see it.
She reads this diary, how excited he is to finally see the baby.
Yes.
And he never. See, come on. This is a fantastic show. I mean, it really is. It's endlessly interesting. It gives you lots of ideas of how you can do your own research on any item that you would like to find out about as well.
We try. Yeah.
Genealogy is similar if you think about it. You're just doing research on yourself, kind of.
Totally. Well, we also have a very, very extensive website. I mean, we have really good tools on how to do it yourself. We spent a lot of time working on the website. It's a really important initiative to us. And we also have great tools for teachers on our website.
And you guys always need people to submit stories, objects. If there's something, the one example I give when I explain the show to people is someone found a flag in their attic and grandma said it was on McKinley's coffin when he was assassinated. Was it? And then here come the thread tests, here come photographs to try to figure out, could this be? So if there's anything like that in your house, or anything you don't even know really what it is, not necessarily a fine piece of crystal. I mean, that's something more for Antiques Roadshow, but there's just like an interesting curio that you want to know more about.
Yes.
Submit it.
Exactly.
It's pbs.org. I want to ask how many months a year are you traveling for the show? How many investigations do you do personally every season?
Oh, it changes. It really, we all have crazy schedules. So it kind of just depends on who's around. We do about 7 or 8 episodes each. Since Eduardo's kind of stepped into the picture this year, it's a little less.
So you sort of like have 4.5, 5 history detectives right now. Because Wes is doing fewer and Eduardo's doing more now.
Well, they're pretty even. You'll see Gwen, Takufu, and I are doing 6 this year, and the 2 of them are splitting the rest.
Have you already started for next season?
We just signed for seasons 8 and 9. Yeah, thank God. And our researchers are now on staff. We're gearing up. We'll probably do we have a lot of stories that we're starting to research now. We start shooting in December. We shoot all the way through May. I'm away probably, once or twice a month.
Oh, that's not too bad.
It's not that bad. It's not that bad. I mean, it's enough for me to be home with my children when I need to be home with my kids.
It's the perfect job. It really is the ideal job. People must come up to you and
all
tell you
the
how
time.
jealous.
They do.
You have a fan club, don't you? I think I saw something on Yahoo. You have a fan club.
I did. Someone started a fan club many years ago. It's kind of gone over to Facebook. And we've kind of pulled our resources together because it's really not just about me. I was saying to someone who actually stopped me on the subway yesterday, the reason why I think our show really works so well is we're all really different. And we're completely different. We come from different backgrounds. We have different ethnic backgrounds. We have different, study backgrounds. The only similarity is that Takufu and Gwen are historians, and Wes and I are from the auction house business. But
auction house business, requires a huge degree of
knowledge.
Historical accuracy and knowing how to do research.
I'm not sure Wes and Takufu would agree with that, but I mean Gwen and Takufu. But yes, I totally agree with you. But I think we work because the sum of us all together shows that we're all so different, and I don't have a second degree. My degree was Christie's. I mean, I did not go on to get my master's, and I did not go on to get my PhD because I'm popular arts. I mean, I'm 20th century popular arts. I ran, comic books and sports and entertainment and rock and roll and posters. There's no degree in that. You learn that from being at the auction house for all those years.
Yeah.
And I think I probably get the most emails saying, "How can I do that without getting my master's?" And I'm not discouraging anybody from going back to school because I think education is wonderful. But in this day and age, if you don't have the resources to monetarily go back to school, you can certainly do it without it.
Well, that's actually a very inspiring thing to say. If you don't have the resources to get the education, there's all sorts of ways you can still educate yourself.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean,
and being a history detective on your own is one such example.
Yeah, I mean, and even Gwen and I actually had lunch yesterday, and we were talking to someone, and we were discussing how in their group that they all watch History Detectives together. Some of them hadn't even graduated high school. but they all watch history detectives. There's still people, just because they haven't had the opportunities in life to have these grandiose educations doesn't mean that they're not knowledgeable, they're not smart, and they can't figure things out.
Do you have to leave home to be a history detective? Can you? How much can you do from your own computer?
You do. As I said before, you can kind of do the initial. You can make a lot of phone calls. You can do the initial investigation. Libraries and historical societies and archives, you have to do it. You have to do it. And I say to people all the time, even with the Antiques Roadshow, when I was there, you have to see, you have to feel, you need to talk to people. You want to go collect something, go to the shows, go to the auctions, look at the objects, see the difference in repaint versus original paint. Look at a 19th century document and a 20th century document. Look at the difference in ink and how it changed through the years when you're trying to look at autographs. There's a lot of things that you actually need to train your eye to help you learn.
What kind of resources do you suggest people use when they're trying to get the basic training, like different inks, different papers, knowing how things have changed?
Start with your local historical societies, start with your local museums, start with your local libraries. Lots of libraries in themselves are museums. They have great archives, but check locally. You'd be surprised. You go into these historical societies and they're these dark, dingy, dirty, little, no one really cares about homes or houses. Scotch tapes on the side. And you walk in and there's a plethora of information that's open to the public if they walk in.
That's just the display. Behind the scenes, there's probably a library, an archive, and someone who's passionate about it too, who's probably, I'm thrilled you've asked this. I'm so bored.
Totally. And that, I think people, you forget about it, and they don't think about it. Yeah. So, and I also think it's really encouraging to be knowledgeable about your own roots. When people come to Port Washington, they say to me, well, what's this place about? And I said, well, it used to be a big sanding mine place. I had to learn about it because I was like, okay, I'm living here now. Where am I?
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I find it really depressing that people don't seem, some people, obviously you have a huge following, but some people just don't care about what happened around them, where they came from, where they live.
They don't.
Is this something that is happening right now in this country, or is this the human condition in general?
I'm not really sure. I mean, look, we've been on the air for 7 years, and we certainly are not as popular as the Housewives series, you know. And
maybe you guys should have some cat fights.
No disrespect to them, because it's a great show to watch, the cat fights. But
you take one. You could do that.
But it's I think people just have different passions, and people are busy, and sometimes they're like, who cares? But there are those people that do care, and those are the people that we're trying to help. And look, if we can bring anybody in and say, hey, education is really important and it can help you make yourself a more well-rounded person, then that's the goal. And really, for me, the amount of emails I'm getting from college students and high school students is the most important.
That's surprising.
It's amazing. And I will tell you, I did a story on Crazy Horse this year. So my son comes home last night and says, Mom, we're learning about the monuments. And I told your story about Crazy Horse to my class yesterday. Last year, he got off the bus and he screams, Mom, we're learning about the WPA programs. And I had just done a story on Thelma Street and Diego Rivera and their murals that they were putting up all over San Francisco. So we downloaded the photographs and he took them into school the next day. My first grader was doing, they had to pick a women in history. And he said, I'll do Amelia Earhart. So, even like my first grader at the time was kind of really taking in what I'm doing.
I wonder why so many people are so bored by history. Do you think, I think, and I'm putting words in your mouth here, that history's been done so poorly? There are so many avenues for really boring history that's why people get turned off by it, especially in school. Because when you talk about history on your show, it's fascinating. I hate even to use the word history almost.
Well, I think it's twofold. One, we make it emotional, and we make it entertaining. But there's the why factor. When you sit in school and you're like, why am I learning about Canada? Why am I learning about Europe? They don't understand. I don't think kids are at that age. They don't understand the importance of it. It's just like taking a kid to Europe when he's 5 years old. He doesn't care. He only wants to see the London bridges because they're burning down.
Do you have a favorite place that you like to do research, by the way? Where do you love when they send you somewhere on History Detectives? Where do you get, we get to go back?
The National Archives.
Yeah?
No doubt. We couldn't do a show without the National Archives. I mean, it's a pain because it's so big and it's so massive and there's a system, but the National Archives has the best archive. I mean, we need the National Archives. There's no doubt about it.
Huge.
Yeah. And I have to tell you also, the New York Public Library is the main building is probably my second favorite place, and they have the most amazing collection. I mean, people don't realize that library in itself is probably one of the best museums in the country.
So make sure, it's a good. You live in the New York area, don't you?
I do.
Yeah. doing research in your own city can be a good way to start, then I imagine, because you don't have to travel. And if you might have an archive, if you have an object that you know or a house that you want to research in your own town, the records are probably going to be in that town.
Always. I just said that to you before.
Yeah.
The best place to start is
make sure you do it in your own. But make sure not just starting in your own town's archives, but making sure the object that you choose to select is probably going to have some sort of story that's based around you.
Well, you
can
maybe
never tell
you
where
can't
it's
really
gonna
tell.
lead you,
I just think that people don't recognize that they have resources in their hometown. They think, you have to go here, you have to go there. I need the New York
You don't
Public
have to go to the
Library.
National Archives. You don't have to go to the New York. Yeah.
You don't. You could definitely
Not necessarily to start with, anyway. Who knows where you might end up?
Exactly. And I laugh all the time because I'm like, these people are these experts in these crazy things. I'm like, how did I end up here? Or what am I doing here? I'm like in these small towns that I've never even heard of before.
Getting rained on.
People are always like, where in the world is Elyse Luray?
She's on PBS. She's on PBS.org. The other channels that you're on?
HGTV.
And that starts?
Well, October 11th is the Endless Yard Sale.
Don't miss that.
It's a good one.
Yeah. Elise, I'm so happy that you came in. It was fascinating to talk to you. You have a great job. It's so interesting. Everybody, History Detectives is on PBS in the summers, and you can watch episodes and investigations right online on PBS.org. You've been watching Big News, wallpop.com. I'm Jason Cochran. This is part of the AOL network of broadcasts. See you later.